Is it ever reasonable to believe that a miracle happened? How about one used to support a religion, like the resurrection? These are important questions given the vast array of competing miracle claims swirling about. Whether the testimony is modern or ancient, you won't be able to escape the suggestion that various ailments have been supernaturally healed, that people have come back to life, or that the moon was split in two. Sometimes these claims can seem relatively harmless. After all, if someone thinks they were healed and it just brings peace to their life, then who cares? Well, normally these beliefs are tied to a network of foundational religious beliefs, and there's a lot at stake in accepting or rejecting those. Because of this, thinking well about religious miracle claims is of utmost importance, and we're going to be focusing on the alleged resurrection of Jesus in this video. But first, what do I mean by miracle here? For the purposes of this video, the critical consideration in determining whether an event is a miracle is whether it conflicts with a very well-confirmed regularity, one for which we have a tremendous amount of observational evidence. To state my conclusion up front, I'm going to be arguing that human testimony by itself is not strong enough to establish that a religious miracle has occurred. Notice that this isn't the same thing as saying that miracles are impossible or that it could never be rational to believe a miracle happened. No. It's a very specific claim about what human testimony can do on its own. On my view, without being part of a strong cumulative case, it can't get you very far at all. Let's start with a simple example. How do you know that the sun will rise tomorrow? Well, the totality of your experience tells you that it will, so unless you are given an extremely good reason to doubt that experience, you're justified in relying on it. Similarly, every second of your life that law-like regularities hold should increase your confidence in them. What this means is that any given miracle claim is up against this mountain of experience to the contrary, which is quite the burden to overcome. Hume summarizes, "No testimony is sufficient to establish a miracle, unless the testimony be of such a kind that its falsehood would be more miraculous than the fact which it endeavors to establish." But why shouldn't testimony be able to overcome our experience? You might initially think that it could, but it's more complicated than that. Why do we trust the testimony of others in the first place? Well, because in our experience, people tell us true things a lot of the time, or some of the time. In other words, you can't really pit testimony against experience, because experience is the very ground for your trust in testimony in the first place. So really what we're weighing is our experience of the world moment to moment against our experience of the reliability of other people's testimony more generally. I think you can see where this is going. Not only do miracle claims run contrary to our experience in general, but human testimony, and specifically religious testimony, is notoriously fallible and suspect. Most importantly, the sea of religious testimony towards the miraculous is filled with either demonstrably false claims or claims that can't all be true because they cancel each other out. Oh, and if you want to say that all the stuff that people reported happened and it was just evil forces, that just opens up new problems. See the link in the description. Further, when we look into the testimony in favor of foundational religious miracles, it's arguably not of the quality we should want given the extraordinary claims being made. It's not just that, though. Humans already have a proclivity towards telling wild stories, and when you add religion to that concoction, things can get out of hand. As Hume quips, "If the spirit of religion join itself to the love of wonder, there is an end to common sense, and human testimony in these circumstances loses all pretensions to authority." Finally, religious testimony generally comes from time periods where people were presumably more credulous about these things, or if in the modern context, from groups who are pretty credulous. Charismatic Christians are one example. When we combine all of this, it comes down to weighing our experience of the world moment to moment against our experience with human testimony, combined with our empirical knowledge of the fallibility of religious testimony specifically. If testimony is all we have to go on, then I think it's clear that you should reject the religious miracle claim 10 out of 10 times. To reiterate, this does not mean that I'm saying there is no amount of evidence that should lead you to believe that a miracle occurred. Let me explain by using an example. John Earman, I don't know, wrote a book called Hume's Abject Failure that apologists like to throw around whenever Hume is defended. Despite his rather uncharitable interaction with Hume at various points, he actually makes some startling admissions that lead me to believe that apologists haven't even read the book that they're referencing. For example, he says, "Even if a worldwide opinion poll found hundreds of millions of witnesses to alien abductions, I would still not become a believer. I am not completely intransigent on this matter. I would, for instance, be swayed by hard physical evidence, such as pieces from a flying saucer." Setting the exaggerated numbers aside, the point is that he would need multiple lines of evidence to overcome his skepticism about alien abductions, not just testimony. And I think that, given everything I've said so far, that his approach is correct. No one should be expected to accept religious miracle claims on the basis of just testimony, let alone lose sleep over some isolated facts surrounding a body that went missing a couple thousand years ago. And this brings me to my main point. The number one reason to doubt Christianity is that it's primarily based on accepting testimony that religious miracle claims happened. something we have an overwhelming reason to reject. Given this, how should Christians proceed in trying to convince people who think properly about these topics? My advice is to prioritize making a cumulative case. Stop focusing so much on isolating certain approaches and instead combine them. Treat Christianity, or your version of it, as the worldview that it is. Argue for the existence of God. Argue that the incarnation is something we should expect God to do. Argue for the fulfillment of prophecy. Argue that Christianity is the true fulfillment of Judaism. Argue that we have good testimony that lines up with the minimal facts. Argue for the divine inspiration of the Bible. Do not expect skeptics to believe that a guy came back to life and floated into the sky without a comprehensive case involving multiple lines of evidence. And you shouldn't believe unless those conditions are met either. But as I mentioned, part of the cumulative case is going to involve defending the divine inspiration of the Bible, which is one of Christianity's biggest weaknesses. Tap on this video next to me to find out why.